What's up, noobs? Rick here. I just finished 2 days ago the Ordo Fanaticus RTT First Contact, where I actually came in third with my Grey Knights. So I wanted to show you all the process of how that went, from list building to my matchups, then of course how the tournament itself was. So with that, let's go ahead and get right into the list. It's a little different than what you've probably seen before from some other competitive people, and myself included. And the main thing that's different is, if you stick around, you'll learn about how I ran around with 10 Terminators and caused total havoc. We're gonna start with a battalion. This is Prescient Brethren. The Prescient Brethren are kind of become my favorite brotherhood, not just from the competitive side and the rules, but also the lore. I just love the idea that they see into the future and they go ahead and move around their forces and are in the right place at the right time. I got one additional relic. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I have the Mortal Wounds Librarian. You know him, you love him, you see him everywhere. He's great. He's got Purifying Flame, Vortex of Doom, Psychic Epitome, the Brotherhood Psychic Power, which no one ever uses. And then, of course, I had 5 points left over, so my sweet little man got his Stormbolter. Then I have a Grandmaster and a Nemesis Dread Knight. This is the Nemesis Dread Knight you've seen me use all the time. It is the Gate of Infinity, Empiric Amplification. He has Hammer of Righteousness for +1 to wound. In combat, he has Unyielding Anvil to give everybody OBSEC. He has a Gatling Silencer. He has the Psy Cannon. He's got the Teleporter. He's got the sword, and his relic is, of course, the Sigil of Exigence to go ahead and jump as soon as he gets targeted by any ranged attack, and he has Servant of the Throne, the upgrade for the once per game turn long 3-up invul. I use him all the time. He's a mainstay. He's a beast. People hate to interact with them, which I love. And then, of course, Kaldor Drago. So not only is Kaldor Drago an incredible beat stick in combat, not only is he one of the few characters in the game with a permanent 3-up invul at all times, he's basically a little librarian. He casts 2, so I gave him Gate of Infinity and Empiric Amplification and Sanctuary. He casts 2, knows 3. Troops, here's the meat. The meat are 10 Terminators, not Paladins, Terminators. Now you're asking, did you bring an Apothecary? Yes, I did. And then you're asking, well, why'd you go Prescient Brethren instead of Preservers for the 5-up? 2 reasons. One, the stratagem for Prescient Brethren is amazing. Reroll 1s to hit and 1s to wound just makes everything so efficient. And then, of course, the Divination Warlord trait, which is on the Apothecary. I'll get there in a little bit. All of those things go ahead and farming CP for added CP. That's why I took a battalion as well. I wanted as much CP as I possibly could, and then being able to gain back my CP and that strat is just incredible. Versus Preservers, where yes, I could have a 5-up Feel No Pain instead of a 6-up Feel No Pain, but I would also have to be spending 1 CP for most turns on my Terminators to have them cast a second power, because they're there for a melee threat as well as a ranged threat, and Hammer Hand just makes Terminators just bonkers, because they're getting Drago rerolls to hit, and then they're getting Hammer Hand rerolls to wound in combat. So for most of my games, they were charging in and they were rerolling all hits and rerolling all wounds, which is just nuts. Again, it's that efficiency. And then the potatoes, you just heard about the meat. The potatoes are 2 strike squads. Then here's that Apothecary I was telling you about. He's got Warp Shaping. He's got the Divination Warlord trait. And then I also gave him the Gyro Temporal Vault, which, if I'm completely honest, came up exactly 0 times in all 3 of my games, and I would get rid of for an extra CP. I forgot when I put it on him that it was actually a psychic action to have him cast it. So I gave this guy effectively 3 psychic actions, because I wanted him there to change the tide whenever I needed him to, and any other turn I wanted him to be casting Divination for that extra CP. Throwing the Gyro Temporal Vault on him just basically cost me a CP, so I was starting with 8 instead of 9, and it came up 0 times. It's just not worth the extra CP. Then the little garnish on that plate are the Servitors here. You know them as well. You love them as well. They are your action monkeys. They're going to be raising banners for you. They're going to be doing investigate signals. They're going to be doing mission actions. They're just good. People usually ignore them because they're not worth shooting, they're not threatening, so you can go ahead and gather up your points that way. It's the vegetables that most of you probably don't like, but I love, so maybe they're some bacon seared Brussels sprouts or something. But 20 interceptors, these guys are just incredible. I combat squatted them every single game. So I had 4 little 5-mans running around, the 12-inch movement, ignoring terrain. They're beasts in combat. They're fantastic. I love them. I do find it funny that when the 9th edition codex first came out, I was running 30, and then I was running 25, and now I'm running 20. And then rounding out the list, finally, so the dessert, maybe a little scoop of vanilla ice cream, maybe some mint chocolate chip if you're feeling froggy, is a Nemesis Dread Knight. Got everything that you normally see on him. He's got the teleporter, the great sword, and the silencer, and the side cannon. Dread Knights didn't get less good. I just wanted to try out a Terminator list. So why did I build this list? Well, I was talking again to my coach, Ben Sherwin, Advanced Warfare, if you want to look up his coaching service. I had noticed that in the new 2022 mission pack, we had a couple more missions that had a center objective, and he and I were talking, and he said, well, I'm trying out this new Grey Knights list that's basically just goes to the middle and sits there and holds it, so why don't you try that out? He knows I love Terminators. Who doesn't love the Terminators? They're fantastic models, they're gorgeous. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Let's try it out. So this list is effectively made to push up into the middle with as many buffs on it as possible. You're gonna have Sanctuary from Drago, Hammerhand from themselves. They're gonna have the 6-up Field of Pain from the Apothecary. In this list specifically, they could have Fight First from the Gyro-Temporal Vault. That was not something Ben said I should do, but here we are. I'm trying to get cheeky. And then the Servitors are gonna move up with them along with the Mortal Wounds Librarian and probably Drago. And they're just gonna be a pain to dig out of the middle. The Servitors are there to do Investigate Signals, which is a secondary that got buffed in the 2022 pack, and with so many more missions that have center objectives, bringing the Servitors with you so that they can just give you 3 points every single turn is very good. So that is the general gist of how this list would play. So I'm going to take things like Stranglehold and Investigate Signal and obviously Purifying Ritual because it is the best secondary in the entire game. Now, that said, when I took it to the game, how did it actually go? Well, like I said, I came in third, and I did not expect that. I was hoping for 2-1. I definitely did not expect to have the most points out of the people that went 2-1, and that's how you end up in third. Round 1 was against Tau. It was a man named Robert. He's a very funny guy. He and I set down our armies on the table, and I made a joke about how I'm an A-tier army with a B-tier list. And then he said, well, I'm an S-tier army with a C-tier player. And we chuckled. Great way to start the match. The mission was recovered the relic, so that's going to be 6 objectives, 1 deep in each person's deployment zone, and then 4 really actually quite close together in the middle. There's nothing in the center, unfortunately, but that's okay. I took Purifying Ritual, raised the banners and behind enemy lines. I know I just said that isn't how I'm going to build a list, but it is the way that I thought I could play this, having never played 9th edition Tau before. It ended up not being the case, but I didn't do as poorly as you're probably thinking with the way that I'm responding to this right now. His secondaries were To the Last, Retrieve Nachman Data, and of course, Abhor the Witch. He's Tau. Why wouldn't he take Abhor the Witch? I put 1 Strike Squad and 1 Interceptor Squad into Deep Strike. I actually did this every single game. It's not like part of my list or part of my army build or anything. It's just when I win in every match, that's kind of what I thought I should leave in Deep Strike to put pressure, make sure that they were leaving units behind to screen me out, all that. And it worked out most games. So anyway, he put a 5-man crisis team into Deep Strike. It was his heavy weapon crisis team, which has all the big guns. I don't know Tau super well, so they have a lot of shooting, surprise. His list was pretty standard for an all battle suit list from what I've seen. He had a stealth squad, 2 of the 5-man crisis teams. He had Fard Sight, Cold Star Commander, Enforcer Commander, 1 3-man broadside team, and then 3 big Kroot squads of, I think, 10? They were like 9 to 10, or... and then, of course, he paid for a ton of shield drones. I think half of his models were shield drones. We used player-placed terrain in this entire tournament, which I have started to really love. You know when you've walked into a match and there just isn't enough terrain on the table and you know you're going to have a hard time, especially into a shooting army like Tau? That isn't a thing here. And even if you have fewer pieces of terrain, when it's player placed, you're in control of where they go. So it adds another layer of complexity and another layer that you can mess up and make your game harder, or even lose if you do it really poorly. But it puts that into your hands to go ahead and use the terrain in the way you see fit for your playstyle and your list. And the more that I use it, the more I really like it. We use player-placed terrain, and he castled up hardcore. I also castled up very hardcore because I wanted to go second, and I won first. I started in Tide of Shadows, because who wouldn't? I knew he took Retrieve Knockman data, and I knew that he was going to use that Cell Squad to continually get points, and I figured if I can throw away a 200-point model to take out his Stealth Squad and keep him from getting 12 points, I figured that was worth it. I shunted him up. Everyone else just kind of moved out. The Terminators got almost into the middle, strung out to grab one far objective. The other objective on my side, I put some Interceptors in there. They were in dense cover in a forest, and then I put my Grandmaster there as well. And that was effectively my entire first turn. Drago tried to cast Gate of Infinity. It did not go off. This is a thing you'll hear me say repeatedly throughout this whole event. I never once successfully cast Gate of Infinity, which is hilarious in retrospect. I didn't even notice it until after the event when I was putting together the outline for this. I'm like, wow, Gate of Infinity never got off. I did put Sanctuary, instead of on the Terminators, I put Sanctuary on that little Interceptor squad that was in dense because they were kind of hanging out in the open. And then I scored 4 on Purifying Ritual, and I got up 2 banners. His turn 1, he buffed up his 1 anti-infantry crisis team with all of the buffs from the commanders and the Enclave and all this stuff. He then moved them through the obscuring terrain, unloaded on my Terminators. I popped the Transhuman, True Silver Armor, and with all those buffs, which by the way, Tau, especially with these buffs, and I don't know how he did it, it might have been a prototype upgrade on all of the stealth or the crisis suits, but they effectively just ignore cover entirely. So you don't get light cover, you don't get dense cover, they just ignore it. So Tide of Shadows was kind of not great against the crisis teams. It was great against everything else, but it was awful against the crisis teams because it was basically like I wasn't in a tide at all. He only manages to kill 2 Terminators with all of the shooting, but the broadsides step out of cover. They're -1 to hit anyway. They fire their railguns at the Grandmaster Dread Knight. This is after I had already run him through my list and let him know that it's the Grandmaster Dread Knight that can jump away. I jump him away into his deployment zone behind some obscuring. He's then allowed to retarget with the broadside, so he fires at the normal DK, which I assumed was dead, but I made 5 out of the 6 of my saves, and then I saved against the mortal wound from the railgun, so I only took like 4 damage onto that Dread Knight, which was huge. And then he put all the smaller guns from the broadsides into that Interceptor squad, but between being in dense cover, having Tide of Shadows for the +1 armor save, and then also Sanctuary, they were able to weather it pretty well, and I think I only lost 1 model from that squad. So that's the end of his turn 1, and I'm actually feeling pretty good. Like, I weathered all that fire. I only lost 2 Terminators and 1 Interceptor. I bring back one of the Terminators to my Apothecary for 1 CP, so I'm only down 1. I've still got a sweet 9-man squad. I've got my Grandmaster Dread Knight in his lines. Apple juice. At the end of my movement phase, I move up my Terminators and the Mortal Wounds Librarian and Drago. So I'm inching towards him now. He's got some Crute out front trying to like screen me out, so I can't smite them or anything. Move my Grandmaster up. Because of the way the terrain was, I had to kind of inch him around and move in between some stuff, but I'm in a position where I now have a 7-inch charge onto his Enforcer Commander, and I know if I can get that Grandmaster in there on that Enforcer Commander that he's dead, and then I can pile into the Crisis Suits, which I know can fall back and shoot and all that stuff, but any free movement is good movement. In my Psychic phase, I switched to Tide of Celerity. This is something I also did every game, is I spent 1 turn in Tide of Shadows, and then I moved to Tide of Celerity. I never used Tide of Convergence even once in this whole tournament. I scored 4 for Purifying Ritual again, got 2 for Banners, obviously. My shooting, I mainly just shot out a bunch of Crute. I killed 1 entire 10-man squad on the left side where the stealth suit had been. I was purposefully not trying to shoot the screening Crute because I wanted to charge into them. So I think I shot between Psychic and shooting, I got them down to like 3 Crute. In the movement phase, I dropped a strike squad down in their deployment zone, and I cast Hammer Hand on them, and that was a 9-inch charge, obviously, because I'm coming out of Deep Strike. I'm feeling pretty good. I haven't really put the hurt on him yet, but I haven't taken any real damage. I'm way up in points. I've scored 12 for primary now because I'm on every objective in the middle and my own. He's only back on his home one. This is a hold 1, hold 2. So he's only scoring 4 when it ticks back over to his turn. So when it comes to charges, my opponent was even, I'm saying like, oh my god, this is so bad. There are so many dudes all up in my face. The Terminators charge in on the Crute, absolutely decimate them, consolidate into, they're right on the other side of the wall, his deployment zone. My Grandmaster has a 7-inch charge in Celerity, and my Strike Squad has a 9-inch charge in Celerity. So we all know the math. 9-inch charge in Celerity with a reroll, you have something like an 80% chance of making it. What I didn't know is that Tau have an anti-charge strat. So he popped it, and it added 2 inches to every charge. I'm like, okay. Now instead of pretty much knowing that my Grandmaster's going to make it in, I now have like an 80% chance to get my Grandmaster in, and now an 11-inch charge on my Strike Squad makes that nearly impossible, even in Celerity. So I miss all of those charges. Every single one. I missed the Grandmaster, I re-rolled it, I still failed, and of course I rolled the Strike Squad anyway, and they didn't get in either. And my opponent breathed such a sigh of relief because he knew as soon as I could grab him by the belt buckle, sit him in place, that I was going to have a grand old time and he was going to have a terrible time. But he looked out. I missed all of my charges except the Terminators. His turn 2, I paid for those failed charges dearly. Oh my god, Tau can shoot. Even with the 3+ invul on my Grandmaster, I died to the Crisis team that he dropped out of Deep Strike. The heavy weapons team was just like, fuck that Grandmaster Dread Knight, and obliterated it. I don't even think it came close to me actually making it. The other Crisis team does the whole move through the wall, shoot and fall back thing again, but now they're in range with all their flamers, and so they kill 6 Terminators or something, even with all those other buffs on them. The Crute fell back out from combat with those Terminators, and I even used Transhuman, and they just crunched through those Terminators. It was insane. I was watching him roll, and he gets to like re-roll 1 wound from every unit from Farsight, and then he was near his commander, so he's re-rolling ones to hit, and then he had some other buff from a prototype system or something, so he's re-rolling ones to wound, and it was just crazy. And of course he has the commander that re-rolls all hits and all wounds all the time. It was just a crazy amount of shooting. Even the broadsides are just going Nova. And I think I picked up right around 70% of my army in that turn 2 shooting phase. Because I had put everything kind of on the line, trying to get it out there, away from obscuring, to get those charges off, and then failing all those charges. It hurt. It hurt a lot. He probably killed 12 or 1300 points of my army in that shooting phase. The rest of the game was mainly me trying to play for points. I was being real cagey with the remaining interceptors. I was trying to hide behind obscuring. I was making him come out to me. I was still scoring very well for primary and secondaries. I was still getting 2 for banner every turn. I was still getting 4 from purifying every turn. But it was just too much. His commander can also teleport like our Grandmaster can when it's shot at, so he got behind some of my interceptors and killed it, and then they're so fast and they fly, they were going to go kill my servitors and my strike squad on the next turn, so we talked it all out, and it's very obvious that he would have me totally tabled at the end of turn 4. So we called it, and that was that. It ended with 74 to 69. That's right. I only lost by 5 points, which I took as a moral victory for 2 reasons. 1, I had never fought Tau before, holy shit. And 2, I got 69, which is, as we all know. So what are my takeaways? All right, I could complain and bitch and moan about Tau shooting. I already did a little bit. I could complain that my dice failed me or whatever, and I lost all of my... or I failed all my charges, even though I did everything I could to try to make them as, like, you know, reliable as possible. It's still a dice game. You can still roll double ones. You can still get fucked. I'm not going to do any of that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to talk about the things that I didn't do well and the things that I could have done better. So I took behind enemy lines, and I think I only scored a total of 4 points for it, because I brought down that strike squad and the Grandmaster was there on turn 2, and that scored me 4, and otherwise I got nothing, because he just killed me so fast. So behind enemy lines was not a good choice. I guess maybe if he hadn't been screening very well at all, or he was custodes or something where he's just got a really low model count, maybe behind enemy lines is really good, but it was a poor choice in this specific matchup, and I will not take it again in this kind of situation. However, I did a very good job of having board control. I seized the initiative on turn 1. I pushed out very aggressively. I was smart to stay out of range of his flamers. I was smart to put up banners and use Purifying Ritual when I did. And from the outset, I was way up in points. And if I had gotten off a couple of charges, this game would have been a lot closer, I think, because he wouldn't have been able to just shoot me right away. He would have had to spend resources to do it. And then the other one is, I just don't really like banners as a secondary personally. I took it in my old list, my old 5 Dread Knight list, because I had 3 squads of servitors, and so when you have 3 of them, raise some banners. Who gives a shit? Like, you have nothing else to use them on anyway, right? But with 1 squad, it's a lot harder to look at an interceptor squad and be like, yes, all I want this thing to do this turn is raise banners. That just feels bad a lot of the time. I won't be doing banners a lot, just in general, not with this list, unless I figure something out on how to play it better, and then I won't be doing behind enemy lines. So those are my takeaways. But Robert was a great guy. He, it seems like he's played Tau a long time. He played them when they were bad, and now he's playing them when they're very good, and he was laughing. He's like, yeah, I know, this is insane. They're so efficient. He's like, they are way undercosted. And we went to lunch actually after this game, and he and some of the NoobHammer guys and I were all talking, and you know, he's just like, yeah, they're just really cheap. Moving on to my round 2. This was a really cool round. So not only was Chris a great player and a fun guy, but I'd never played the new Aeldari either. So now I'm 2 games in, playing 2 armies I'd never played before. The mission was Data Scry Salvage. I took Purifying Ritual, grind them down, a Stranglehold. He took grind them down, engage on all fronts, and no prisoners. I put a Strike Squad and an Interceptor Squad into Deep Strike. He had nothing in Deep Strike. His list was Eldrad, a Warlock, a Farseer on bike, 1 squad of Rangers, 1 squad of Dire of Avengers, 2 5-man Wraith Blades. So those are the Wraith Guard that are melee focused. So Wraith Guard are kind of like their Terminators. He had 2 squads of Windrider bikes, 1 Warwalker, 2 Wave Serpents, and the creme de la creme was a 10-man Wraith Guard squad that were all armed with the Assault 1, Strength 10, -4 AP, D3 +3 damage, 18-inch guns. And if that sounds nuts, That's not all. They also do, on a wound of 6, they do 1 mortal wound. They can also fire into melee, into engagement range like a vehicle, but they do not take the -1 to hit when they do so. And on top of that wicked offensive profile, their defensive profile is toughness 6, 3 wounds, -1 damage. There are 40 points. That's what a Grey Knight Terminator costs. And I was just like, blink, blink. Wow, that is really good. That is like, I am super jealous. That's amazing. I knew I had to stay the hell away from those things. Now, I had a misunderstanding, and I don't know if it was the trauma I'd experienced when I started playing 9th edition against my buddy Brian, who played Aeldari all the time, and he brought the Wraithguard with the Flamers. But I thought these were also Flamers. I didn't figure out until I was actually putting together this outline for this video that they're actually Assault 1 and they're not auto-hitting like D6 Flamers. I heard this profile and I was like, nope, want nothing to do with that ever. I'm not gonna tank that in any way. That's insane. So my game plan was, don't engage the Wraithguard. Here's how that went. I won the roll-off again. I picked Tide of Shadows to start in again. I knew he took engage on all fronts, and I knew that he only had really those two squads of bikes, and I figured that's what he would use to kind of come around the side and try to score 3 every turn. My goal for turn 1 was A, don't get near the Wraithguard, B, kill the bikes. If I could do that in turn 1, I was going to be super happy. Because of the deployment zone for Data Scry Salvage, which is the new vital intelligence, you can be really close to the person's deployment zone. So I was very aggressive with placing my terrain like right on the borders of my deployment zone. I stuck interceptors back behind obscuring terrain all towards the top edge of the board, and I put my Dread Knights and my Dread Knights on the right flank, and I put my Terminators in the middle, and then I just pushed up. I did not use Gate of Infinity this turn, because I did not want to drop anything near those Wraithguard. Instead, I was very careful about going ahead and measuring out exactly how far away everything was from those Wraithguards. So the only unit I moved within range of the Wraithguard was my Grandmaster Dread Knight, which my opponent knew could jump away. He asked when I set him on the table, and I reminded him. Going first in Data Scry Salvage is an immense advantage, because it's hold 2, hold more, but it's also sticky objectives. So once you touch it, even if you leave later, you still hold it until they come and grab it. I have interceptors and I have shunting Dread Knights. So I am just like all over the board. I've got 3 of the 4 middle objectives by the end of the movement phase. I shunt up the Dread Knight onto one of the ones on the far side that's in range of one of his bike squads. I pop the strat from Prescient Brethren and I light them up. There are only 2 left. One of them fails morale, left 1. So sad, but... And then my 2 interceptor squads shot and killed his rangers. And that was it. That was my whole turn. I didn't charge, I didn't do anything else. I ran up, I took a bunch of objectives, and then I sat there. His turn 2, he comes shambling out of his objective with his Wraithguard. He can only get in range of my Grandmaster, as I predicted. He moves that 1 bike that's still left back to go get engaged. He moves his other bike squad to go shoot at and engage one of my interceptor squads. He gets his Wraith Blades out of one of his Wave Serpents, moves the Wave Serpent up into the middle of the board. The other Wave Serpent moves over to also shoot at my interceptors. Eldrad moves up so that he can cast on my Terminators. But guess what? Grey Knights. Everything I have in range can deny, and everything gets +1 to deny. So one of the themes that comes up repeatedly in this matchup is his psychic phases were effectively just shut down. He got off 2 powers the whole game. One was this turn, he cast whatever the power is that he wanted to give his Wraithguard Obsec, and I was like, okay, I didn't try to deny that. I only had a few denies in range, and that one didn't matter because I wasn't going to be able to get onto his back objective anyway. I didn't care if he got it off, and he did. And then everything else, he either failed, even with Eldred, who can like reroll even one of his psychic dice. He doesn't have to reroll both. And then if he fails the cast, he gets to reroll the cast for free. He's nuts. He's very reliable as a caster, but not when there's a bunch of Grey Knights around, just shutting off his powers. That's it. That's the end of his psychic phase. His shooting, the Shuriken cannons, the new ones, are very good. They're strength 6, -1 AP, 2 damage. So they're already better than a heavy bolter. And then if you get a 6 to wound, the 6s to wound go to 3 AP instead of 1. They are marine just killers, and that was obvious because between the bikes and the wave serpents, I lost an entire interceptor squad that was even benefiting from Tide of Shadows still. So while Tide of Shadows wasn't that great against the crisis suits for Tau, they were very good against Aeldari, and even so, it was just weight of fire. I think I lost another couple interceptors in another squad, but that was it. He took the shot he had into my Grandmaster Dread Knight with his Wraithguard. He had nothing else to shoot at, so he shot at my Grandmaster. And of course, I jumped my Grandmaster away, and I jumped him back onto the only objective in the middle of the board that I hadn't yet owned, which meant now I own it. I couldn't jump him into his backfield because he had done a very good job of screening me out. Chris was very diligent about explaining that he's moving these units here and there to spread them out to specifically block me from using gate, shunt, and deep strikes. So he did an excellent job there, and in return I just had to go grab another primary because that's the only thing I could really do, because I wanted to stay out of range of those Wraithguard and I couldn't get in his backfield. Those Wraithguard now have nothing to shoot at, so they don't shoot. His Warwalker comes stumbling up and fires everything at my normal DK, but I don't remember the specifics, but it whiffed. I don't know if I made all my saves, or he just missed everything, or just nothing wounded. Is probably a combo of that, but no damage was done at all. He joked that, like, that's a Warwalker, like, that's what they do, and I immediately was thinking about, like, every time I've ever used like a las cannon missile launcher dreadnought or a Corvus Blackstar with my Deathwatch army. It's just like, yep, you shoot it and then it doesn't do anything. Anyway, so I felt for him. I felt his pain. His only charge was he charged a squad of bikes into my interceptors on the top left flank. I think he killed one. I got like wicked good saves or something. I think he bought the cheapest bikes he could just to do engage. He's told me they're not very good in melee, and they weren't. And then I swung back with my interceptors and I killed 2 of them. So those bikes are only 2 wounds. And guess how much damage a Nemesis Force Weapon does? 2 damage. All right, my turn 2. I move my Terminators up into the middle along with their usual retinue of Drago, the Mortal Wounds, Libby, and the Apothecary. The normal DK moves up towards his deployment zone now that there's nothing left over there. The bike has moved onto my side of the board. The Warwalker is the only thing really between him and the deployment zone, so I just start to march him up that way. I have now moved out like all of my other interceptors. They're running amok on the board. The only things that haven't moved is I have a strike squad and my servitors on my home field objective. The strikes are there to cast Purifying Ritual, and the servitors are there to do data intercept, which is the mission secondary, where for every objective you hold in the middle of the board in no man's land, you get 1 point for each one of them, up to 3 points per turn. So I'm scoring 3 every turn like clockwork from that. In my psychic phase, I switched to Tide of Celerity. I'm getting ready. I've got a lot of units in range for charges now, and a lot of them are at like 4 inches, 5 inches. So Tide of Celerity just guarantees me all of them. I don't have my Terminators in range just yet, but they're getting there. I have other plans for them in other phases, and I'll get to that in a second. I purposefully waited during my psychic phase to cast with the Mortal Wounds Libby, because I was trying to bait out all of his denies, and it worked. I don't know what he cut off. I don't know if he cut off gate or I just failed to cast it. I just do not remember. I didn't get it off. All I know is that there were no denies left by the time the Mortal Wounds Libby went Super Saiyan, which he did. Even with the 5-up Feel No Pain from Ulthwé whatever his faction is of Aeldari, even with the 5-up Feel No Pain to Mortal Wounds. Mortal Wounds Libby kills 3 of these Wraithguard, just wham, 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 wham. Puts 1 wound on Eldrad, 1 wound on the Warlock, which almost kills it, because I didn't know this, but they only have 2 wounds. And then 1 wound on some other squad somewhere else with Vortex of Doom. So the Mortal Wounds Libby is there doing exactly what I brought him to do, which is just shoot you with mind bullets. A couple more smites come in, I think from the Terminators and from Drago. They get him down to 5 remaining Wraithguard. I net 4 points for Purifying Ritual again. I pay 2 CP for Cybolt ammunition, and I shoot the shit out of the Wraithguard. So now I have 40 shots coming in, rerolling all hits thanks to Drago. Auto wounding on 6s, and then they're -1 AP. And that got me another 2 Wraithguard. So there are 3 left. The Grandmaster Dread Knight, he fires up. He pops the stratagem this time for reroll 1s to hit and reroll 1s to wound. And I bring him down to 1 left. So in 1 round of shooting and psychic, I managed to kill 9 Wraithguard, which felt super, super good. And I knew he had to roll a 1, not run away in morale, which he did. So that took care of that crazy Wraithguard squad, which at the time I still thought had flamers. And strength 10, -4 AP, D3 +3 flamers would be absolutely bonkers. On the other side of the board during shooting, my normal Dread Knight just winds up, puts everything into that Warwalker and kills it. Just no muss, no fuss, it goes down. And then Kaldor Drago nonchalantly like shot over his shoulder and killed the 1 bike that was in my backfield because 2 damage. Mastercrafted Bolt, Stormbolter, it was like perfectly suited to do that. And then in my charge phase, my Grandmaster charges into the Wave Serpent and murderizes it. Terminators are still out of range for charge, which is too bad, makes me sad, but I have Interceptor charge the bikes, swing in, and kill another bike. His turn 2, he sees that the Interceptors are holding their own against those bikes, so he sends his Farseer on bike to go help out. His last squad of Wraith Blades, he gets out of the Wave Serpent, and he moves the Wave Serpent into my backfield to score engage on all front points. The second Wraith Blade squad is that got out on turn 1 now moves forward to kind of grab his home that only had Eldrad on it at the time because I schwacked the Wraithguard. In his psychic phase, he either fails to cast or I deny every single power that he has. Then in his shooting phase, the Wave Serpent fires at my strike squad and I think kills 1 or 2. The Warlock shoots his pistol at my Grandmaster Dread Knight and actually like does a wound if I remember right. And that was pretty much the end of his shooting. Like I had neutered his Wraithguard by turning off his psychic powers in the first place, not being in range of them, and then just obliterating them in 1 turn. And so he didn't have he had very little shooting left. Bikes were dead. He had some Kabalite warriors in the back. He had the 2 units of Wraith Blades left that but they're Wraith Blades, so they're only melee. He charges his Farseer on bike into my Interceptors. I think he kills an Interceptor, leaving 2 left. They both swing into the Farseer and almost kill it, leaving him with 2 wounds. So on my turn 3, this is where I know I've pretty much got him, right? Like, I've lost an Interceptor squad, a couple of Strike Marines, and a couple of Interceptors at this point, and I've lost nothing else. He's lost a Warwalker, 400 point 10-man Wraithguard unit. He's lost a Wave Serpent. He's lost a Ranger squad. And he's almost lost another unit of bikes on the other side. So I'm feeling really solid about this. I noticed that he had positioned Eldred in a little too far forward, and his Wraith Blades were kind of a little further back. So I was thinking, aha, I can charge him. Like, I could actually theoretically shoot him, but I was like, that's a good charge. It's like another inch closer. So I'm gonna leave it right there. Still in celerity. Move my Terminators up. I'm looking at his home objective. I know he's not OBSEC because I turned off that spell in the previous turn. If I can tow in 1 Terminator, it's mine. So I'm looking at it and I'm getting greedy. Move Drago back to go handle the Wave Serpent by himself because he's Drago. The Wave Serpent can kite him, but if Drago can get to him, it's over. Mortal Wound, Libby, and the Apothecary are still hanging out with the Terminators. I bring in another squad of Interceptors to get into melee on the top left, so now that's just a horrible brawl up there. I drop my Strike Squad and my last Interceptor Squad out of Deep Strike to just hold objectives around the Wave Serpent, because I don't want them to just get it. I was thinking that if this game goes on too much longer, like if I whip this turn, those interceptors are going to try to hunt down and like trap that Wave Serpent long enough for Drago to really get in there and smash it. My Psychic Phase, he denies Empiric Amplification, which I was trying to stick on the Wraith Guard. Oh well, but I got Hammerhand off on the Terminator squad, and Drago got Sanctuary off on the Terminators. He tries to cast Gate because I wanted to move the Mortal Wounds Libby up towards the Wraith Blades that had come out of the Wave Serpent, not the ones on the home objective, so he could go Super Saiyan again, but Gate didn't go off again. I get 4 more points for Purifying Ritual, so now I'm on 12 for Purifying Ritual. My shooting phase, I picked up the Warlock super easy. I think it was with the Librarian Stormbolter even. And then I believe I picked up 2 Wraith Blades that were on the contested No Man's Land objective. That took a lot of Stormbolter fire and everything to actually do. And then the Terminators fired into the Wraith Blades on the home objective, not with Cybolt ammunition this time. I think I only picked up 1 of them. I didn't want to shoot at that squad too much because I wanted to charge it. And I knew he was going to pull from the front. I pointed out, like, hey, you kind of left Eldred hanging. So he knew Eldred was dead, but he wanted to keep those Wraith Blades alive, so he knew he would pull from the front. My charges go off. Terminators are hot to trot. They get in there, they grab the Wraith Blade and Eldred by the buckle. I've got like 3 Terminators standing on his home objective, so now I hold all but 1, except the one that he now has Wraith Blade on in the middle of the board. The Terminators are re-rolling all hits from Drago and all wounds from Hammerhand in melee. The Justicar targets Eldred and schwacks him. I don't even think it was close. Eldred just flops. The rest of them go into the Wraith Blade. Here's the thing about Wraith Blades. They're -1 damage. So our 2 damage weapons suddenly become not very good. They're effectively now power swords. I'm re-rolling wounds though, which is super nice. So it's taken a lot to actually cleave through these things. I don't kill anywhere near as many as I think that I can. I think I only got 2, and then he swings back and he gets 2 of my Terminators, and I'm like, woo! Now I'm out of range of the Feel No Pain from the Apothecary because I charged, and then I had to pile in to get enough Terminators in range to swing. I don't have my Feel No Pain. I still have Sanctuary. Still have a 2-up armor save because I'm Terminators, but even so, it's not enough. The Interceptor squad in the middle of the board that I dropped down in from Deep Strike manages to get off a charge into the Wraith Blade in the middle and contest the objective and kill a couple. But I think we had equal models after he swung back, so now no one's holding it. So his turn 3, he kind of knows it's over now. He's lost his Warlock, he's lost his Farseer because my Interceptors up there swung and killed the Farseer. He's killed Eldrad, so he has no characters left. The only thing he has left is like 2 diminished squads of Wraith Blades and a Dire Avenger squad, 1 bike, and 1 Wave Serpent. So we go ahead and we play out turn 3, but then we just talked it out after that. Also, it's the right thing to do. I should point this out. Never ever, if you're going first, browbeat or talk your opponent out of taking their turn if you get one. So like, if you get your turn 3, you should let them have their turn 3, because it's the right thing to do. That way they can get as many points as they can. Talk it out after that. Never talk out half of a round, talk out a full round. Like, it's a big deal. You can really screw over your opponent that way, and if that's your deal, I kind of don't want you watching my videos, and I sure as hell hope we never play. So the long and the short of it is he kills another interceptor or two, and I think he gets another Terminator or two. I swing back but with pile lens and consolidates and stuff. He knows I've run away with the score, and there's very little he can do. And now, by the end of it all, after we talk it all out, I own everything. The end score was 97 to 24, and the only 3 points I dropped was grind them down turn 1, because we both shot and killed 1 unit on turn 1. So neither of us got grind them down for turn 1. Those are the only points I dropped in this. If I had managed to pull that off, I would have had a perfect score. So thank you to Chris. Dude, you were a funny opponent. You took all of those hits and you just kept like cracking jokes. You taught me a lot about the new Aeldari Codex, which I am thankful for, and I hope to play you in the future. Takeaways is Eldred is an absolute beast. Like, the dude gets to reroll all psychic tests if he he gets to reroll 1 failed psychic test. Ulthwé gets like a 6-up invul for their whole army. They get +1 to cast the first power every turn. It's nuts, but the counter to that is Grey Knights. Like, I just have too many denies, and I get +1 to deny. That kind of sucks for him, right? Like, he's got all of these plans that rely on these psychic powers, and he just doesn't get them. So it felt good as a Grey Knight player to be able to use my denies effectively, because usually I get to use 1, maybe 2, and in some games I don't get to use any at all. But it's nice that I got to actually consistently deny. My opponent did an excellent job of screening me out of his backfield until I was already there from, you know, physically walking up the board, thanks to gate never going off. He locked me out. I wasn't able to get in his deployment zone until... And then I cannot stress enough, again, how important it is that if you have fast units in your army, regardless of what species you play, whatever army you play in the game, if you have fast units and you can go first on Data Scry Salvage, you probably want to go first. Especially if you're facing an opponent that doesn't have a lot of fast units, like, say, Death Guard, something. Because you can go up, toe in, touch every objective, score maximum for 3 turns, and then you can just fuck off and go do something else because, like, you're holding it anyway because it's a sticky objective mission. When I set up and when we were deploying and when we were rolling to see who would go first, I wanted second. And then I realized, like, halfway through turn 2 how important it was that I went first. Like, seizing the initiative on this mission and holding all of those right off the bat is insanely good. I was talking to Chris after the match, and he and I were talking about things that we could have done better, and I think we both agree, and I'm not sure how I feel specifically, not because I think it's a bad plan, but just because I don't know his army that well. But he was saying he should have probably, like, castled up in a corner more, let me spread out, and then he could have moved forward and did a lot of damage. I don't know how well that would have worked. I would have loved if this was like Garage Hammer to re-rack and roll again and see if that gameplay did work, but this was a tournament, so that didn't happen. I was very proud of myself for recognizing the threat that those Wraith Guard could have been. Even though they ended up being far less of a threat than I thought that they were at the time, I still don't want to take 10 Assault 1, Strength 10, -4 AP, D3 +3 damage shots. So I was very proud of the way I handled that, the way I pre-measured everything, and the way that I knew I had to stay away from them and I had to take them out with shooting and psychic, and I could not charge them. Lastly, Tide of Shadows was so good turn 1. Like, he missed so many shots because the -1 to hit, the way that I placed my player placed terrain, so even when they were standing, like, my interceptor squads were like standing on top of buildings and things, they were still getting the +1 to their armor save, and they were still getting -1 to be hit, and that bonus for infantry gives an immense amount of survivability. Round 3 is against Deathwatch, so which was cool to me because I was like, great, Grey Knights and Deathwatch, those are my 2 armies. I get to play both of my armies. This is a matchup, again, I'd never had before, and even though this isn't a new codex, it is one that I know very well, I was still excited because this is 3 for 3 armies I never played with my Grey Knights, so My opponent was Isaac. He and I were starting to feel the previous 2 games, but he's a very nice dude, and he made this a very comfortable game for me. The mission was secure missing artifacts. My secondaries were Purifying Ritual, Investigate Signal, and Stranglehold. So, secure missing artifacts is like the mission that this army was built for. It had a center objective. It was on the orc table. So we had a giant ruin right in the middle, right with the objective on it, and I took Stranglehold. So again, this is like exactly what I want. This is what my Terminators are there to do. This is like their party time. His secondaries were Stranglehold, Oath of Moment, and Assassinate. Now, with Stranglehold and Oath of Moment on a 5 objective map, I now know this is going to be a blitz and a murder fest in the middle. There's no way around it. If he wants to score Strangle and Oath, he needs to be in the middle. If I want to get Investigation and Strangle, I need to be in the middle. So we both now know it's going to be a brawl in the middle. I put Strike Squad and an Interceptor Squad into Deep Strike, just like I have every other game before. And then his list was a Corvus Blackstar, which made me super happy to see, 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, a Captain with the Dominus Aegis, a Primaris Tech Marine with Master of the Forge upgrade so he could heal for 3. He had a big 10-man melee monster Proteus kill team with a black shield in it. It was all Thunder Hammers or heavy Thunder Hammers. And Storm Shields. It was really scary. That was in the Corvus along with a Librarian and a Company Champion, which if you're a Deathwatch player and you haven't looked up the 70-point crazy character killing Company Champion, you should. That's what he brought with the Blade of Triumph and all of that stuff. And then he had an Odometer kill team, which he had combat squatted, so it was 5 heavy intercessors and then 5 eradicators. And then he had 1 Proteus kill team, all ranged, all storm shields, all Deathwatch storm bolters that he combat squatted into 2 5-mans. And then the final icing on the cake is he brought 3 Inceptors. So, guess who won turn 1? Me. This time, I mean, I wanted turn 2, but I didn't really care that I got turn 1. It was fine. I picked Tide of Shadows. I know I need to get in the middle as fast as I possibly can. My Terminators want it real bad. I moved my Death Ball of Terminators up out of my obscuring terrain. They're backed up by Drago, the Mortal Wound Libby, and the Apothecary. I absolutely know that his play with that Corvus that's transporting that melee monster team is that he's going to move it into my deployment zone immediately on his second turn. So I leave a bunch of Interceptors in the back as a reaction force. I made a little miscalculation here. I did all the math, I measured everything. I was able to just get my Grandmaster into position to fire onto the Corvus Blackstar. I was like just at 24-inch range. And then I shunted up the other Dread Knight to be next to the Grandmaster, also to fire at the Corvus. And then I realized I couldn't get Empiric Amplification off onto it. It was too far away, even if I spent 1 CP to increase the range, because Empiric Amplification's range is only 12 inches, so you can only increase it to 18, which 18 is less than 24. And that meant I had to, if I wanted maximum efficiency, I needed to shoot at another target, and I figured 2 Dread Knights weren't going to kill a Corvus Blackstar anyway, so I targeted one of the Redemptors instead. And I was thinking that I could kill 1 Redemptor if I had Empiric Amplification on it and 2 Dread Knights firing at it. So my Psychic phase comes, I get 2 points for Purifying Ritual, I try to cast Empiric Amplification on the Redemptor from my Grandmaster and I fail. I should have spent 1 CP to recast it, I did not. I cannot tell you why. That was probably the biggest mistake of this match. Drago tries to get the Terminators up into the middle with Gate of Infinity, and guess what? He fails to cast it. Actually, that's probably what I saved the CP reroll for, and then I failed it again, if I remember right. I never got Gate off once in the whole tournament. It's so funny. I was going to trail some of the Terminators back to make sure they still got the Apothecary bonus and stuff, but it was just, it clearly wasn't going to happen. So In my shooting phase, I didn't have a lot of targets. I mainly think that just the DKs fired into the Redemptor, and I think the Redemptor got down to 4 wounds, and that was it. That's the end of my turn 1. His turn 1, just like I thought, he launches that Corvus forward, he bombs my Terminator squad as he goes over, and he is now sitting in my deployment zone. His Redemptors pile up. Because of the way the terrain was located, his wounded one was out front, so it kind of blocked the one that wasn't wounded, which was a little helpful. Not something I planned on, but I will take that. His Proteus kill team on the bottom goes and grabs that objective. They just waltz up there. His Inceptors have to advance to get onto the middle objective, which he does. And his Proteus kill team has to also advance to get onto the middle objective to have more models on it than I do, because I moved up an interceptor squad that I was like, I guess I'm throwing these guys away, but I need 3 for Stranglehold. So he now has more models on than I do, so he now controls it. The Primaris Tech Marine runs up, heals the wounded Redemptor, so now it's at 7 wounds, which is its top bracket. He moves his Eradicators out, but they're kind of blocked by some of the terrain, and he can only get 2 in range of my Red Knights because the ruin he was hiding behind had no windows on the bottom. His Librarian is in the Corvus, so there was no Psychic phase this turn. Shooting, his Corvus puts, I think he put like 2 las cannon shots into the Terminators and the Storm Strike missiles into the Strike Squad on my home objective. I lose 2 Strike Squad guys, and I think the las cannons do what las cannons do, and they bounced off the Terminators. I don't think they did any damage at all. I don't even think he wounded with them. So the Redemptors haven't shot. They line up and they target my Grandmaster. And I had told my opponent what he can do if he's targeted. Isaac said that he knew Grey Knights and he knew exactly what that was. He targets him, he fires at him, so I jump him away. And Isaac had left a gaping hole in his deployment zone behind obscuring terrain, so I put my Grandmaster there. His Eradicators weren't in range, and he couldn't see him, and his Redemptors couldn't see him and weren't in range either. And Isaac just goes, oh, that's not good. And I just smile, because that's exactly where I want my Grandmaster Dread Knight, right? The Redemptors and the Eradicators fire at the Dread Knight and make a whole bunch of saves. He lives. The Eradicators completely whiffed. I think they had like 4 shots. He missed 3, and then 1 failed to wound or something. It was really lucky. So that Dread Knight is still there being a menace. In the middle, his Proteus kill team can't shoot because they advanced. The Proteus kill team on the bottom has nothing to shoot at, which only leaves his Inceptors, who, even though they're too close for Tide of Shadows to matter, get the -1 from advancing and shooting anyway, so they fire into the Interceptors, and I lose 4 of them, leaving 1 guy who makes his morale, and then he sticks around. And there's nothing for him to charge, so that's the end of his turn. My turn 2, I'm like, oh yeah, everything is coming together. Everybody's like, other than the fact that I missed that gate, this is pretty much exactly where I want everyone to be. I've lost a total of 7 models now. The only thing worrying me is that Corvus is in my backfield. So I move my Terminators up into the middle of the board. They're finally, like, they can see their charge targets. They're licking their lips. They're ready for this. Their retinue of Drago and the Apothecary are coming with them. Mortal Wound Libby, I turned and moved him back towards the Corvus so that he was in range with all of his powers. I still leave those 2 Interceptors. I think I moved them back more towards the Corvus to make it easier charges for them to fall out. And if they didn't fall out, I knew it was going to be easier charges for him to make into me, but that was just a risk I was willing to take. I dropped down my Strike Squad that I have in reserve into the corner next to his Proteus kill team on the bottom because I want to threaten him. I want to get him off of that objective. He uses Auspex Scan, picks the Deathwatch Bolter special issue ammunition for 2 damage, and I'm suddenly like, oh shit, this might go really poorly. But somehow he whiffs everything again, missed a bunch, and then failed to wound a bunch, and then whatever did wound, I just straight up saved because it's at no AP. In Psychic, I changed to the Tide of Celerity. I got 4 points for Purifying Ritual. I elected to have the strike squad that was next to the Corvus cast Purifying Ritual. I thought it was worth the the points instead of one more smite. That would probably do one mortal wound and then just make it harder for all the other squads to smite. So I'm glad that I didn't, and instead I went for the points. I got 4 for that. The middle objective was purified by the one remaining interceptor that I didn't know was gonna still live. And the Terminators got Hammer Hand off on themselves. Drago cast Sanctuary and Smote, I believe. I don't think I even tried to cast Gate again. Yeah, so now I have the Mortal Wounds Librarian within range of the Corvus Blackstar. I'm about to go Super Saiyan. My opponent knows it. He spends 1 CP for Armor of Contempt. I forgot that was a stratagem. That was a great move. And so I have 2 squads of Interceptors and the Mortal Wounds Libby all go to town on this thing. Spend 2 CP so that I can cast the extra power with the Librarian, and I have 3d6 to cast them all. So Purifying Flame hits, Vortex of Doom hits, Smite hits, the 2 smites from the other 2 squads hit, and I got it down to 8 wounds left, which was making me feel real bad because it just wasn't enough. I was rolling really low on my damage dice for the mortal wounds, and he was saving a whole bunch of them. He saved far more than 1/3. It was awesome. I was actually kind of happy to see the Corvus was taking a beating, because when I play it, it doesn't. It just dies. So shooting got wild. Like, this is where I knew I had to make the shooting phase happen, because if that Corvus lived with 1 goddamn wound, that melee team was just going to push my spokes in, and I wasn't going to have a great time at all. So everything that possibly could that had Stormbolters in range fired at the Corvus. The only thing on the entire board that didn't shoot at the Corvus was the strike squad that was in the bottom corner too far away, and the Dread Knights that were also too far away. Everything else that had a Stormbolter fired at the Corvus Blackstar. I had to spend 2 CP on my Terminators to fire 40 shots with Cybolt ammunition, rerolling all hits, because it was I needed it so bad, and I finally got it. I think I beat him by like 1 wound, which was enough where he knew he couldn't use a CP reroll to save it, and he didn't. He lost 3 of his 12 dudes on the roll to see who dies from a dead vehicle, and they all fall down onto the ground with a Librarian, 3 strikes, and 2 squads of Interceptors just kind of look at him like... I charge. It's a huge charge. Everyone gets in. This melee squad gets schwacked. I think it got down to only like 2 or 3 dudes left. Everyone else everywhere on the board is also charging. My Grandmaster had moved out from behind the obscuring terrain and shot at one of the Redemptors. The other Dread Knight had shot at one of the Redemptors. My normal Dread Knight charges the Redemptor that's on like 4 wounds, hits it, murders it in combat. My Grandmaster charges into the Eradicators and the Heavy Intercessors. I ignore the Heavy Intercessors and I just schwack all of the Eradicators. That leaves 1 Redemptor with any kind of anti-tank firepower on the board. My Strike Squad down in the bottom corner fails their charge out of Deep Strike, even though I'm in Celerity, even though I still have 1 CP and I spend it to reroll. I still didn't get that. So I don't think I got any out of Deep Strike charges, even with Celerity off this tournament either. It's hilarious because the math tells you 1 of those, 2 of those should have gotten off. The Terminators charge into the middle, they charge into both of the squads there, and they schwack them all. It's just like, I have to split fire, but it's just nuts. They tenderize everything in the middle. It was glorious. I'm rerolling all hits, rerolling all wounds. Cheers with this apple juice. It was nice to have my list have a mission that was set up to do exactly what the list was set up to do. His turn 2, we're looking at the board. Mine was so good. My turn 2 was so good that I actually counted, I think he had 15 or 16 models left on the whole board. 10 of those are infantry troops. 4 of those are characters. There's 1 Redemptor, that's at 7 wounds, and then there's like 2 or 3 melee troops left. So we kind of know this is over, but like I said earlier, you always let your opponent play out their turn. So the short version is the Redemptor charges into my normal DK and kills it. The company champion charges my librarian. We're joking as this is happening, like, I'm like, I know how this thing's built. I know you're going to eat my librarian's lunch. Funnily enough, I made every single save I needed to. I failed it by 1. He would have been alive with 1 wound, which would have annoyed Isaac greatly, I'm sure. But my librarian dies. He gets 2 points for assassinate. And then we more or less, we kind of played out turn 3, but we mostly talked it through. My turn 3, I basically clean up what's left except for his captain, his little tech marine, and a couple of Proteus kill team dudes in the bottom, because my strike team was able to actually move up on them and then charge them at like a 3-inch charge. Totally killed most of them, and now they're OBSEC, so I'm holding the objective anyway. My Grandmaster kills the Redemptor, the Terminators fire into and kill the Redemptor. It was just, yeah, so the Redemptor was dead. I have 2 Interceptor squads still schwacking those melee guys, so they all die. And then they kill the, well, I don't even think we rolled it out, but we knew that the Librarian back there and the company champion were going to die as well. We talk it all out, and I walk away 94 to 24. The only points I dropped in this one was I couldn't get my Terminator's fat asses out of the way of my servitors, so I never got to do Investigate Signal for the first 2 turns. Because Gate of Infinity did not go off at all this entire event, those Terminators were just move blocking my servitors. Hooray. Takeaways for this match. First of all, knowing exactly what your opponent's army can do is a benefit that I did not realize how big it is. I knew exactly how far all of his units could move. I knew exactly what their effective range was. I knew everything about his whole army. I knew what all his weapon profiles were. I knew what the ranges of his weapons were. Other than being surprised by the Armor of Contempt strat, I pretty much knew exactly how his army was going to play and how I would have played it. And other than the fact that he combat squatted the Indomitor team, which I wouldn't have done, he played well, and it just was a huge bonus that I had. I also was very lucky in that this mission was exactly what my army was built to do. This is what my list wanted to do. I wanted to get in the middle, I wanted to lock it down, I wanted to force you to come to me, or if you weren't, I could eventually come to you because I'm Terminator, so I'll get there. It just might take a while. And I just scored points. Like, the Interceptors allow me to be super mobile and ultra aggressive and threatening, while the Terminators are just like this horrible brick that you have to chew through. And unfortunately, in the meta right now, just Space Marines are at the point where I know they were the boogeyman of the beginning of 9th, and I definitely know that they are not now. And it just, they don't have the tools right now, without playing the AAR, to really deal with a Terminator brick. It just, I mean, I guess he could have put all his Redemptor shots into there with the plasma. Every failed shot would have killed a Terminator. I could only bring 1 back a turn. I don't know. But if he ignores my Dread Knights, then my Dread Knights will just charge them and kill the Redemptors. Like, it's pretty much, a Redemptor versus Dread Knight fight is pretty much whoever charges who first is going to win. Anyway, I dealt with the Corvus eventually, and it worked out, but like, I cannot stress enough how lucky I was to get just enough wounds through to kill that damn Corvus, because if on his turn 2 he got to decide how they came down and who they got to charge, this game would have been vastly different. But I got very lucky. Thank you, Isaac, for the awesome game. It was super cool to play against another army that I play and love so much. And, you know, you were a great sport, so I hope to see you at more events in the future. All of that said, how was the event itself? Well, I really liked the event. I mean, granted, I'm not the most experienced tournament player on the face of the planet. But one of the things I really liked about Ordo Fanaticus is that they made it very clear from the player packet, from the BCP links, and their pre-game briefs about the fact that they wanted this to be a sportsman first event and winning second. And I know we are all competitive players. You're probably competitive, especially if you made it this far through the video, but it's important to me to know that those kinds of people exist, because I don't want to play with dicks. I want to win too. I want to take first place, but I don't want to do that so bad that I want to make everyone else's life hell and I want to cheat. I really like that they did that. In fact, for their prizes, what they did is Best Sportsman got the first place prize, and then Best General got the second place prize. And then they had another award called Most Awesome, which I think other tournaments might call a Renaissance Man. It's the person who did the most to make everybody else's experience really good, which you would think is sportsmanship, but like this isn't just that. It's like comments between games. It's like, were you helpful? Stuff like that. And as the organizers were watching the players, they would hand out these little 3D printed gold coins. And the more of these you got, the more awesome you were. And if you had the most of these at the end of the event, you won Most Awesome. And I'm happy to report that Norm, who's in my LVO video, and Zach, who is in my Orcs vs Deathwatch bat rep from a long time ago on this channel, the two of them and I play a lot, and they tied for Most Awesome, and then it ended up being won by Zach by I think one of these tokens. So congratulations to Norm and Zach, and then congratulations also to my buddy Shane, who plays Orcs, who was undefeated and came in second. There's another Ordo Fanaticus RTT coming up April 23rd. I am entirely planning on being there. I have already spoken to the wife. Even though that is her birthday, I will be there, mostly because she's working, and she works nights, so she'll be sleeping during the day anyway, and then she'll be gone by the time I get home. We will be celebrating her birthday another day. So, if you made it this far, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy these kind of AARs. If you do or you don't, leave a comment below. Let me know what you liked about the format, what you didn't. Was I too wordy? Was I not wordy enough? Do you want me to go into specifics about tactics or anything like that? Please leave a like, comment. All that stuff really does help me out. I know you're all tired of hearing that from every content creator ever, but them's the facts. And don't forget to subscribe and play some games and, you know, call your mother.